Hey everyone, welcome to David in History for the Ages here. Hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm waiting for folks to log on in. Leave some comments in the chat and everything. Looking forward to this. I don't do a lot of lives, so this should be really fun. First off, I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining. I've heard a couple cool milestones. We just hit 1 million views on my channel and 30,000 subscribers all within a week. So that's been really cool. So big thank you to everybody who's been there watching, sharing. All of that is great stuff. If you always want to support my channel, there's these cool shirts, right? You got my History for the Ages shirt. Some of you already have, really awesome, have different colors and all of that. You could always do a one-time thank you, a Patreon member. It's all good. And so what I want to discuss today, I don't get a chance to do a lot of lives because, I got kids and all that and doing this for my, some one-man show doing this here. But, with everything going on in the Middle East and with Israel and Iran, I thought people might have questions that I can give some background to from a historical perspective, right? One of my biggest things is understanding what we want to avoid. My most popular video is something called the Samson Option. I hope you've all seen it. If you haven't seen it, give it a watch, a like, a share, a comment, all that good stuff, because it really does show you the gravity of what we're dealing with. So I want to kind of give a little background history first, right? And then see what questions you have as we go through this. And I always have to put on my glasses to read the questions here. So I see a few comments here. Cool. Nice to see a few comments. Good. Hopefully more people come on in. I also put a poll up there. Hopefully you saw my poll. Do you think the current ceasefire is going to hold, right? I think one of the mistakes many people make in terms of understanding, not just the Middle East, but understanding history, is we think too much in terms of days and weeks and months and years instead of decades and centuries, right? And when you start to think in decades and centuries, you start to look at how to act better in terms of how to deal with things there. So, in terms of how did the situation get to where it was? So if you take a time machine back to before 1979, in Iran, there was the Shah, right? The Shah of Iran. He was much more Western. You have pictures of women in Iran in bikinis and, buying clothes and makeup and all of that. This was all part of what was called the White Revolution. And this is when the Shah came in and he kind of westernized Iran, made them very pro-West and a lot of liberation for women's rights. Was the Shah perfect? Of course not. No, the Shah was, not at the end of the day, a perfect guy. He had a secret police force that harassed a lot of people. Not everybody in Iran benefited from the White Revolution. But overall, obviously, life was much better then than what happened in 1979 when you had the theocracy, right? The Ayatollahs, the Iranian Revolution there, that all kind of set into motion where we are today. Now, there's even stuff further back. I have a very long, detailed video on the history of Iran since World War II. I talk about a guy named Mossadegh, who, upset a lot of the Westerners, the United States and England specifically because of oil issues. And, you can kind of watch my longer video on that. That was even before the Shah. But then once the Ayatollahs come in, obviously it's a very strict theocracy, right? I tell my students theocracy, rule of religious leaders, but it's a very intolerant one, frankly, and you will see that their views are very narrow-minded, and because of that, they don't even want Israel to exist, right? What do they chant? Death to Israel, death to America as well. I think one of the things that's been forgotten all this is this Iranian regime has been responsible for the deaths of Americans as well, not just Israelis, right? You think of the embassy that was hit, various attacks. And what's happened historically is Iran's worked through primarily proxy wars against Israel, right? Whether it's, Hezbollah or Hamas or the Houthis, whatever it is. Israel has seen them developing their nuclear system. And one of the things Israel is known for is not waiting for something bad to happen, right? This is, of course, the whole never again from the Holocaust, right? You don't wait, with history of Jewish people. If you study like the long history of Jewish people, when somebody says, hey, we want to kill the Jewish people, they mean it, right? If you go back all the way to the ancient Assyrians and Babylonians and Romans, of course, and so forth, and of course, World War II. And so Israel takes these threats for face value. If you say we want to annihilate your existence, they're going to think, hey, if they have an ability to annihilate our existence, that's exactly what they're going to do. So, Iraq was an issue. I know one of my other videos, if you get a chance to watch it, is Operation Opera. And that was back in 1981, where Israel discovered that Iraq was building nuclear weapons. And so they flew. It's amazing. If you ever saw the movie Top Gun, I remember the newest one, Maverick. I remember sitting in the theater watching this and thinking to myself, hey, did they take this from Operation Opera? Because it was all about flying really low below the radar. They flew like 100 feet above ground to get to the facility. They blew it up and got out of there. Now, the thing is, Iran learned from that. And that's why Iran built their nuclear facilities under a mountain, right? And this is why, of course, it took, President Trump coming in, dropping those bunker busters. And, I've read all sorts, just like everybody else, was it fully eliminated, partially eliminated? What happened to the uranium they were processing? And so, can I say for certain that, yes, absolutely, it's all gone and there's nothing to worry about ever again? I don't think I could say that for certain. And there's nothing to keep them from starting it up again. It definitely set him back, and that should make, frankly, everybody happy because, as I said, Iran is not just a threat to Israel, right? Any nation that has these proxies can use that to get to a lot of people, whether it's in Europe or the United States or Israel. So that's essentially how we got here, right? It's this building up, this theocracy in power, these building ups, and Israel constantly trying to stop them from getting a nuclear bomb. And so, feel free to ask questions. I'm looking forward to kind of any questions you have about, the Iran, Israel, anything even semi-related. I'm just kind of waiting for you guys to put some questions in there, and I'd love to kind of be able to answer them. I've been teaching the history of the Middle East for 25 years, so there's quite a few things I can kind of share with you. In Western civilization, of course, I've been teaching that as well. I've been doing this for like 28 years now. Real quick, before I get to see a question there, real cool, but I want to show you this real neat. This is one of my students made this for me, actually. He sit in my class this semester, and he actually 3D printed. This is the logo for my channel. I thought this is really cool. So this is the same one again on my shirts and stuff. So, pretty neat, right? So I just thought that was really cool. So really neat. So let's see. I see a question here already. Let's see what it is. Do you think Iran will ever find its way back to a more secular society? All right. That's such a good question. That's at the cornerstone of this. So they have tried, right? Back during when Obama was president, they had something called the Green Revolution. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Green Revolution, but it was about, when was this? Time goes by so fast, but when Obama was president, so about 10 years ago, roughly. My math might be off a little bit, sorry. But there was an attempt to try to overthrow the theocracy, because at the end of the day, there's still a lot of people in Iran who don't like living in this theocracy. They want a more secular situation. It's a similar issue to Turkey, right? If you study the history of Turkey as well, and I have unit studies as well. And one of my unit studies covers Turkey, Iran, and Iraq, and Afghanistan, all after World War II. It's great for homeschoolers, great for anybody who wants to learn. I have a ton of unit studies. Turkey also had Mustafa Kemal after World War I. He secularized it. But now you look at Turkey today, and Erdogan, the ruler there, they're kind of also pushing back towards more of a theocracy. So it's a constant internal struggle. Do I think it could happen? It could happen, yes, but it's going to take, this is one of the things a lot of people are speculating. What if we didn't just take out Iran's nuclear facility, but we took out their leadership, right? And you took out the Ayatollahs and their leaders and all that. And where it needs to come from is, yes, the people, but it also has to come from the Iranian military, right? Because at the end of the day, how does a coup work, right? A coup, overthrowing of a government. You can have the most passionate people of, hey, we don't like the theocracy, but, the people with the weapons are the ones in control. And if you can get enough of those military men inside of Iraq, the top military generals, to say, hey, we're tired of this, and you have the people at the same time uprising, then yeah, they can, the theocracy leaders can say, hey, jig's up, and we're gone. So do I think it can happen? Yeah, absolutely. I think it can happen. I don't know in terms of it happening sooner or later, if that's a possibility. So it doesn't seem like, the West has the stomach to deal with it or to encourage it much. Obviously, anybody who's from the United States, people still, Afghanistan and Iraq, and these were attempts to try to bring more democratic nations into the Middle East. And that, I tell my students about this when I cover these stories about the US moving into Iraq and Afghanistan, is if you're going to go do this, if you're going to go in there, you can't go in there for a day, a week, a month, or a year. You go in there for decades. And otherwise, when you leave, it's all going to fall apart again. This is exactly, when you watch my lectures on Afghanistan, it's kind of eerie because before, I have videos where I talk about how, hey, Afghanistan, we got the Taliban out, but if we leave, it's going to collapse. And we left and it collapsed. And it's like, it's not prophetic. It's like, oh, how do you have students? How did you know that? Well, because I teach history, right? I cover enough of this stuff and you see the pattern. So that's the trick. And so to do that from outside is going to be, no one's got the stomach for that. It has to come from the inside. So that's a great question. Any other questions, please put them in there. I'd really love to hear what your questions are. It could be really about anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be about Israel and the Middle East, but that's all good. Any topics that interest you, put them in the questions and we'll talk about them. So love to hear more of your thoughts or questions or thoughts or comments. Go for it. The more people kind of chime in, the better. Let's see. I got a couple here coming in here. Will you do more medieval dark age videos? Yes, I will. I'll always keep doing a lot of that stuff, right? I love the Middle Ages. And so, I've got some other videos coming up. I've got one on which country first gave the women the right to vote. I've got one on the Bronze Age collapse. I've got some other ones coming up, but definitely I keep making ones on the Middle Ages. They're good. And I do have 2 playlists on the Middle Ages, so you can watch those as well if you've seen them all. Let's see here. Opinion on the recent U.S. attack. I'm not one of those think that Iran having nuke is a good thing, but I'm not sure if POTUS has a clue on the aftermath as his recent interview. Yeah, and this is a good question. I don't know about, I think sometimes, to be blunt with President Trump, he's got an ego, right? Everybody knows that, whether you agree with his politics or not. He does have an ego. I don't think anyone can deny that. And he's not one to admit when things don't go well. And so assuming the bunker busters didn't work, I don't necessarily think that he's going to be able to say, oh, they didn't work. And that could be a concern. And so, I don't know about that. That's a good, fair question as well. So thank you for that one. Let's see here. What do you think things will come in the future? Do you imagine things will escalate? So the ceasefire, right? I'm very skeptical of the ceasefire. I'm not going to lie. And that's the poll here. And right now I'm looking at the poll numbers so far. 69% of you think the ceasefire will not hold, and 31% of you think it will hold. I'm probably in the no category. I guess I should have phrased it for how long will it hold, right? A day, a week, a month, a year, a decade. I guess that's part of it. I think until the regime in Iran changes, we're going to be back here, and if it's not with Iran, it's going to be with somebody else. And I think that's the core. I think, one of my another really popular video I have, other than the Samson Option video, which again, please go watch that one. That really puts everything in perspective, is explaining the entire Arab-Israeli conflict in 3 minutes. And now I'm not a fan of doing anything in 3 minutes. I tell people you can't learn the history of the Middle East with a 10-second TikTok. But at the core of all of this is simply nations not wanting Israel to exist. Israel's not a perfect nation. No nation is a perfect nation. But if you took that notion off, Israel's right to exist, and people just said, sure, Israel has a right to exist, 90% of the problems there go away in terms of the Arab-Israeli conflicts. The other conflicts, think about it, Iran and Iraq had a huge war, had nothing to do with Israel. So there's that. All right, let's see. What other questions? Regarding the Middle East as a whole, has there been developments in these parts that alone have shocked you? That's a good question. In these parts, I mean, I think the Abraham Accords was a positive, right? Sometimes I look and like, wow, yeah, there are folks who do want to make peace. So that was a kind of a good positive thing that kind of surprised me. I kind of tend to be more pessimistic in terms of the long-term history of these things. I kind of see history of, there's, sooner or later one side's going to win. And so yeah, so that was kind of nice to see. And obviously the goal is obviously to have peace at the end of the day. So I think the Abraham Accords was a positive thing that kind of surprised me happening. So that's a good question as well. Let's see, what else do we have here? I'm looking through all the questions. Just favorite era in history to study. Yeah, in terms of, for me, I like, I obviously do Western civilization and history of the Middle East. Excuse me. But definitely, I don't think there's an era I love, but there are topics I love. Like when I do the Roman Empire or the Roman world, I love the Punic Wars. I love the Roman emperors, right? When I do, World War II, I love that lecture topic a lot as well. So that's something I really enjoy. All right. What else do we have here? Do you think it's likely Iran will work on nuclear weapons in a more discreet way? There is no such thing as a discreet way anymore, right? I mean, pretty much everything here is so well known. I mean, think about with technology. I mean, they were trying to build this thing underground. And it's no secret, Israel had agents inside of Iran. They knew what's going on. I don't really think there's a way to do this in a quote unquote discreet way anymore. There's always going to be a level of how much do we know exactly, how far they're doing. I don't think they're ever going to give up on it. Again, it's human nature. No one's going to want to be the nation without more powerful weapons. And again, I think this is an important point as well. It's, we say, why don't we worry about other nations having weapons? Britain has nuclear bombs. The United States has nuclear bombs. France has nuclear bombs. I have another video, who has the bomb? And I talk about all the various nations that we know have nuclear bombs. And this is the deal, folks. France and England and the United States aren't chanting death to whatever country, right? And I think that's where the rub is, right? It's just when you openly say you want to use these weapons to destroy an entire nation, that's why it becomes problematic. So I think that's an important point as well. I love this. This is cool. Hey, Juan, former student. Cool. Here's wondering what your opinion is on why the discipline of history is a state of decline. Oh, thank you for that question. Yeah, actually, that's my most recent video, right? What has been going on? Because sadly, history has been taken out of a lot of colleges. Watch my most recent video. It talks about how many history courses have been replaced by various studies. I know I teach at California and community colleges, and just one quick example that I mentioned in my more recent video is you're not required to take U.S. history anymore. Instead, you're required to take ethnic studies. And, I don't have anything against people taking an ethnic studies course. I think it's actually important to learn about various groups in the United States history that I think in the past, frankly, if you look at it, it's a pendulum, right? A long time ago, we whitewashed a lot of stuff. Today, I think the side's gone the other way. And the problem is, it's nothing wrong with social studies or ethnic studies or whatever, but it's replacing U.S. history. And as I explained in my video, history and ethnic studies or history and social studies are not the same. And, I don't know what's going on in a lot of other states, but I know this is a serious problem. And sadly, a lot of it is politically driven. And, that should not be part of education, but it is. So that's a very important topic. So, yeah, I thank you for that one as well. Do you think the recent earthquakes in Iran were underground weapons tests? Well, I don't know about that. I think if they were that advanced, we would know. So I'd probably guess no on that one in terms of, the earthquakes. They do have earthquakes in the region. It is a thing. So I think we would really know where and that would show they were much more advanced in it than even where Israel thought. Yeah, next question. I feel this is deeper than nuclear weapons. Just look at how effective their missiles were. What is the real motive behind U.S. involvement? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point. It's not just about nuclear weapons. Look, this is one of my things when I talk about end of World War II. People say, oh, we used the atomic bombs to end World War II. It killed so many people. I said, we firebombed Tokyo. That killed more people than the nuclear weapons. So you could kill a lot of people with conventional weapons as well. So I think that's an excellent point. I mean, and think if Israel did not have that Iron Dome system, that shoots down all these weapons, right? If Israel did not have that Iron Dome, then this is how the Samson option can happen. And, one of the worst case nightmares is, imagine all those missiles coming in, the Iron Dome doesn't work, fails, whatever, and hundreds of rockets of that size and caliber are entering Tel Aviv and so forth. You are looking at such devastation. That's what could trigger the Samson option. And wow, thank you. I got a little thank you, Eric. Thank you so much for your little donation there. I really appreciate that. Every little bit helps. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you. And so, yeah, it's not just about nuclear weapons. And this is why the whole discussion is it also about regime change. So I think that's important as well. All right. Let's see. Seems like a lot of things have been removed from curriculum. Yeah, I mean, in terms of history, yeah, I mean, there's constant changes in what should be taught, how should be taught. I remember this was years ago. I read an article. If you're an English major at UCLA, you no longer have to take Shakespeare. And I thought to myself, you don't have to take Shakespeare. How can you be an English major and not take Shakespeare? And again, sadly, this is motivated, I think, by politics, and it shouldn't be. History should, show the good, the bad. I was in another meeting recently and people said, well, we can't talk about Western civilization so much anymore because, it's too Eurocentric and it talks too much about people from Europe and we need to, move away from that. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, really? I mean, you look at Western civilization, and for good and bad, it is the foundation of humanity in so many ways. It doesn't mean that other parts of the world aren't important. They are, right? But, no U.S. history without Western civilization, right? Whether it's talking about the Romans, the Greeks, and what they contributed to our world today, it shapes us so much. And, has everything been good? No. One of my other recent videos is Rome brutal or brilliant, right? That's another cool video I have. And I go through, talking about all the brilliant things Rome did and all the brutal things Rome did. And I think that's all part of the legacy. So, yeah, I do think a lot of it is being changed. It is very political. It is very subjective. And it's a shame because I think history should be taught from a non-political way and just kind of take good and bad and present things in that manner. Hi, Ryan. Thank you. Yeah, I love it. So let's see. Do you think it's possible we can actually prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, or are we just delaying the inevitable? I think I do think we can prevent it. I absolutely do. Whether people are willing to do what it takes to prevent it, that's the $1 million question, right? I mean, at the end of the day, Israel's not going to let it happen. They can't. It's an existential threat to their existence, and Israel has shown if they have to do it alone, they will. Thank you, Ryan. Wow, appreciate all the little contributions. That's really cool, you guys. Appreciate that a lot. And so, yeah, absolutely, I do think it's possible to keep them from getting nuclear vessels. I mean, in the ideal world, the people there just kind of rise up and say, hey, you know what, we've had enough, and we want to live a more free society. But that's a hard angle. A lot of people just don't want to do that. What happens if the regime is overthrown in Iran? So this is a good question too, because regime change is not always pretty, right? Just because they get rid of the Ayatollah doesn't mean the next day everybody's, puppy tails and roses and rainbows, right? Obviously, it could still get ugly, it could still get messy. But revolutions are ugly and messy, right? I mean, but then what is the alternative? Not doing anything. So I think that's part of it as well. So it could be ugly if they ever do it. But again, what is the option? I mean, look at Korea. Korea is another topic I cover a little bit of. And you look at North and South Korea, and there's a famous picture I use in my another very popular video of is the Earth at night. And I showed all my students that I have a video on it too. And if you look at the lights of the Earth at night, and you look at the Korean Peninsula, the southern part of Korea is well lit up, very clear, and the northern part is in pitch darkness. And the people live there in what is probably the closest to a 1984 Orwellian society as you can. And so still no uprisings there. And it's been generations. So it is amazing how hard it is sometimes to make this happen. It is not easy to have a change or a revolution in a society. So I think, it's very difficult for that to happen. Let's see, which places can I go through to really learn the history of this region? Sir, of course. So thank you, Viper. So it depends what if you're looking for the long history, I have a History of the Middle East playlist. It's History 165 or History of the Middle East. That's like taking one of my courses. It's literally the same exact lectures in the same exact order that I am shown that my students who sign up for my History of the Middle East class take. One lecture at a time. It's a semester's worth. That will give you probably the most well-rounded survey understanding of the history of the Middle East. If you're looking for something like, I just want a history of Israel, well, I have a playlist on that. I also just created a new playlist and a new unit study on the history of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. So that's something as well you can kind of get into. So I would say it also depends how much time you have, right? That playlist on the history of the Middle East, those are full detailed lectures. And one of the things I've discovered is while I love the long, full detailed lectures, a lot of folks, prefer just those 2 minutes, 5 minutes things, which I also have a lot of as well now. So that would be the one to watch in full. And when you watch, folks, please, guys, leave comments. I mean, the comments is probably, I don't know what the deal is. I love all of you, but I need y'all to leave comments on my videos when you watch them, because that really kind of gets the things going, gets the engagement going, and it gets more views. And, that's how I can keep this going and doing that. YouTube revenue is not great, but, I get the unit studies and the shirts and all that, and that helps me keep this going. And I just love it. If you guys told me 4 years ago, basically, I think I started this really, 2020, I put all my lectures on YouTube, and it's because we went on the, online because of COVID. If you told me today, back then I'd have 1 million views and 30,000 subscribers, I would think you were crazy. But people weren't my students, were just watching this stuff. A lot of homeschoolers picked it up. And so it's been a fun ride. Honestly, it's very, very limited part-time for me. I always have a full-time job. I have a family. So if I do, 30 minutes to an hour this a day, it's a lot. So it's just really cool to be able to share things. So I always appreciate all the support. Let's see. Kiwi factors. I'm not that familiar with Perrine's thesis on Muhammad and Charlemagne, so I'd have to actually look at that. If you have the source on that one, I'd look at it and then read it, and then I could tell you more about it, but I'm not familiar with that particular thesis on Muhammad and Charlemagne. What kind of resources do you include in my unit studies? Oh, sure, of course. So the unit studies are, each one's different, but I have, my videos, of course. I have short answer questions, objective questions, fill in the blank questions. I have open-ended questions. I have a bunch of resources to learn more. And I have a video on my unit studies as well. And you can even find one. I have one on the French Revolution for free. You can find on the Teachers Paying Teacher site, and all of that. And yeah, and you could always just message me, and you could see one free example of it as well. I have a video on one of my as well on, example of what a unit study is. So feel free. Just my email is davidnhistoryfortheages@gmail.com. And I also have a Facebook page. I'm assuming most of you guys know that as well. All right. Any other questions here on the Middle East, on Iran, on Israel? We have about a half hour here. I don't mind. I could keep going. This has been fun. So I really enjoying this. I think of all my lives, this is the most engaged one I've had and the most people. So please feel free. Emmett Scott has written a book called Muhammad and Charlemagne Revisited. All right. I will add it to my list. I wish it's one thing I used to do so much more before the kiddies, is ton of big readings. And so now I just kind of get whatever I can, but yeah. What other questions we have? I could stay on a little bit longer. I was planning to do a half hour, but I'm happy to stay on longer if you have more questions about Israel, the Middle East, Iran, whatever it is. I'm more available than. And you can always message. You can leave comments. Anybody watching this later, if you're watching this later and you say, hey, this was curious, leave a comment. I always, I try to reply to all the comments I get. And so feel free to do that as well if anybody's got any more questions there. So that's the main stuff. What else? Anybody have anything else for me? Feel free to shoot it off. Go ahead. Any other questions on the Middle East? So what's our poll data? So 78% of you think there's no way the ceasefire is going to hold. Yeah, I don't know if I have a bunch of pessimists or realists in the group, but it is what it is. There you go. All right. Well, we've been about a half hour. I don't see any more questions coming in, but I hope that was informative. You learned a little bit about the history of Israel and how we got there, and Iran, and, the Shah, and, all of that. Whoa. Thank you, Tiffany. That's amazing. That's very generous of you. Wow. That's just super cool. That's probably the biggest live chat donation I've had. Thank you. So I appreciate that a lot. Very sweet. Oh, you guys are great. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, if you want shirts, please let me know. You can email me. I got 3 colors. I've got the blue over here. It's a beautiful color blue of my shirts, and they're $23. The shirts are $23. Include shipping and all of that. And my unit studies as well, so you just email me. I'm kind of limited on some of the sizes, but I have the charcoal, the green, and the turquoise blue there. So really cool stuff. So I appreciate all of you. So there's another question here. Let me see. What are some of the myths and negative stereotype traits that Americans and Iranians attribute to one another? Oh, wow. That's really good. I think the myth that many Americans attribute to Iranians is that they all hate us. It's just not true. There's a lot of people in Iran that love America, that love Israel, that love Jewish people. So I think that's probably the biggest myth that, I think a lot of people there, they don't hate us. They actually like us. The rulers don't like us, but many of the people there do. So I think that's probably the biggest myth of there. And, in terms of the people there, in terms of us, again, I think they probably, that's a harder question to answer because I'm not sure exactly what they tend to probably think. We just want to wipe out everybody who's a Muslim, which of course is not true either. But that's the oftentimes where people hear these words and think, oh, they want to kill us all. That's not true either, of course. So I think those two things. All right. There are about 75,000 mosques in Iran. 50,000 of them have shut down. Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting, Kiwi Factor. If you have the source on that, I'd actually love that. Either you could put it in the chat or give me that, because that's a strong indication that there is a lot of people there that are moving towards a more secular thing. So that'd be interesting to see the source on that. That sounds like a lot of mosques. That's the problem today. It's way more research than that. It should be the truth. Things like this. Yep, absolutely. Anyways, so thank you, everybody. I appreciate all the comments and support and everything. Let me see another question. I'll keep going. You guys have questions? I've seen videos and arranged people celebrating Israel. And do you think this is common opinion of us, or are these videos cherry picked? No, they are not. There's obviously some cherry picking and everything, right? People are going to want to show you what they are. But I've spoken directly with people from Iran, right? That's, and when you talk to people from Iran, who, by the way, a lot of time like to be called Persians. I have a video on the ancient Persians, and a lot of people in Iran still like to be called Persians. They're not Arab, they're Persians. And they definitely have a sense of, hey, we love America, we love Israel. So some of it, of course, is orchestrated for show and stuff, but not talking to people from Iran over the years, I definitely think there's a level of that for sure. Absolutely. Cool. Go back 1 minute. When I go back, will I be able to see the questions late to the chat? I believe so. I think when you go back, oh my God, can somebody help me out here? When people go back and watch a live chat video, do the chat questions come up? If anybody knows that, let me know, right? I actually have not done too many of these lives. I believe they do. I think you could see the questions, but plus I've been repeating the questions as well, so you'll be able to listen to it all and as we go through. So very cool stuff. All right. So I'll put up another new video next week, right? So we have more questions. All right. I'll keep going. You keep asking questions. I got time today, so I'll keep going. I'll take advantage of it. What do you think the best way to engage secular and Christians American to help ease anti-Semitism? Yeah. So that's a big problem. The anti-Semitism on colleges is one of the most problematic things. I'm sure a lot of you saw what had just happened in the mayor of New York and their primaries there. I have a video that's also very popular, why our college has become the anti-Semitic epicenter in the United States. And it's kind of scary that, I tell people as a Jewish person, the one of the only places I've honestly experienced anti-Semitism is on my college campus, not in my city, not in my community, just on my college campus. And so do watch that video, and I break down how we got there. And people need to be educated. They need to understand. I find people don't even know what anti-Semitism is. There's something called the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which really defines it well. It's what helped motivate me to do my playlist on the history of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. And so I think because most people on colleges are not anti-Semitic. It's a small group that are really loud. The rest of everybody else is just clueless, and they don't take the time to learn the history, to learn the issues. So they believe the various blood libels that are spread. And it's about getting to those people. I don't spend a lot of time arguing with the people who just hate everybody just because they're Jewish. That those are kind of lost causes. Although I will say I did have a student once who took my history in the Middle East class. And he told me, years after he took the class, told me, before I took your class, I hated Israel. I didn't like him. After I took your class, I'm a Zionist, which was pretty powerful, right? That was like, wow. And I've had other students take my history of the Middle East class and say, I didn't even know Jews were in Israel before 1948. And that shows the level of just lack of historical illiteracy. Another video I'm going to put out is even how history of the Middle East is taught in most schools. I teach it very differently than most schools. And so I do have a video on that. Please watch it. Again, leave comments on it, share it about how we got to this point of anti-Semitism on college campuses, because, 90% of my videos are all history related, but, since 10/7, I have obviously put an effort in to make more videos about things that are obviously related to history, but also kind of connected with what's going on in current events and so forth. So to connect the history with what's going on today. So absolutely. Any more questions? These are really great. This has been amazing. I'm going to have to do more of these. It's so hard for me to do these live views because I have two kids and I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, and it's a little tricky to kind of do this with kids. So I have to find a time. Once the war ends, do you know good tour groups to Israel and family and kids? Wow, all right, that's a great question. So I actually did a new video on the 5 best historical sites to see in Israel. And, I'll say this, Israel generally is incredibly safe, even with the minor conflicts. I tell people you have more worried about how people drive there than anything else. But I never did tour groups. I honestly all went by myself. Obviously, if you're Jewish, there's the birthright. If you're not familiar with that, it's an amazing thing that basically, I forget the exact age, but teenagers are basically given a free 2-week tour if you're of Jewish descent to Israel. And they provide everything for you. And it's the whole idea of taking people who are Jewish out of Israel to give them the sense of, hey, this is the homeland. So that's a cool thing to do if you're Jewish. If you're not Jewish, I honestly don't know what specific tour groups are better than others, but I definitely have, my top 5 video that I put out, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, the best historical places to see in Israel. So there's that. Yep, good question. All right, everybody. So thank you again so much. I think at this point, we'll go ahead and call it. I appreciate this a lot. I'll try to do more of these. I don't know when. I can't ever promise you when I'm going to do these lives, but I got hundreds of videos. Watch, the Samson Option video. Again, give that a watch, share, comment. Right? Because it's been doing really well, and I really want to kind of get that momentum going and keep that going, because I think that's the eye-opening video that people go, ooh, this is why this is such a serious thing. And it kind of puts it really in the perspective that it helps people understand it. So again, thank you for being here. I appreciate this very much. Obviously, if you're not on my Facebook, find me History for the Ages on Facebook. I put stuff on my YouTube post as well and all of that. I have some shorts, but it's those full videos that I really want people to watch and enjoy, whether it's my 3-minute playlist or my full detailed lectures. I try to have something for everything. And if you're a homeschooler, unit studies, they're all available. I have a couple videos on my channel on that. So thank you again, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. You guys are all awesome. Thank you. And we will call it a day. So I'm going to go ahead and end this now. Thank you, everybody.